Imagine a ship, larger than the Titanic, sinking in just 14 minutes. Picture over 1,000 lives lost in the blink of an eye, their stories swallowed by the murky depths of a river. Now, ask yourself, why have you never heard of this catastrophe? Welcome to the forgotten tragedy of the RMS Empress of Ireland. In the early hours of May 29, 1914, as a thick blanket of fog settled over the St. Lawrence River in Canada, two ships were on a collision course with destiny. One was the pride of the Canadian Pacific Railway's fleet, the RMS Empress of Ireland. The other, a Norwegian collier named the Storstad. What happened in the next few minutes would become the worst maritime disaster in Canadian history. Yet, overshadowed by the outbreak of World War I just months later, this tragedy faded from public memory. Today, we dive deep into the mystery surrounding the Empress of Ireland. We'll uncover the events of that fateful night, explore the lingering questions, and give voice to the silent witnesses lying at the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. The Empress of Ireland, a ship of dreams. Our story begins with the ship herself. The RMS Empress of Ireland was a marvel of early 20th century engineering. Built in 1906 by the Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering Company in Scotland, she was designed to be the jewel of the Canadian Pacific Railway's fleet. At 570 feet long and 14,191 gross tons, the Empress was an impressive sight. She could accommodate 1,580 passengers and crew, split between four classes: first, second, third, and steerage. With her sleek design and powerful engines, she could cruise at a respectable 18 knots, making the journey from Liverpool to Quebec in just 6 days. Life aboard the Empress was a microcosm of Edwardian society. First-class passengers enjoyed luxurious accommodations, fine dining, and exclusive access to the ship's best amenities. Meanwhile, those in steerage made do with more basic facilities, dreaming of the opportunities that awaited them in the new world. But who were the famous passengers on the Empress of Ireland? While she didn't boast the same celebrity guest list as some of her contemporaries, the Empress did carry her share of notable figures. On her final voyage, passengers included Henry Segal, a prominent Canadian theatre owner; Lawrence Irving, son of the famous actor Sir Henry Irving; Mabel Hackney, Lawrence Irving's wife and fellow actor; Sir Henry Seaton-Carr, a British explorer and big game hunter. These individuals, along with over 1,400 others, had no idea that they were embarking on the Empress's final journey. As the Empress of Ireland left Quebec City on May 28, 1914, the weather was clear and calm. Captain Henry George Kendall, an experienced seaman who had recently taken command of the Empress, looked forward to a routine voyage across the Atlantic. But as night fell and the ship made its way down the St. Lawrence River, a thick fog began to roll in. Visibility dropped dramatically, and the crew of the Empress found themselves navigating through a gray void. Meanwhile, coming up the river was the Storstad, a Norwegian collier ship carrying 11,000 tons of coal. At around 1:55 a.m. on May 29th, the two ships sighted each other. At first, there was no cause for alarm. They were about 8 miles apart and on courses that would see them pass safely. However, as the fog thickened, both ships lost sight of each other. Captain Kendall, believing he knew the Storstad's position, ordered the Empress to stop and drift while waiting for the fog to clear. Unknown to him, the Storstad had altered its course. At 1:55 a.m., the Storstad emerged from the fog, heading straight for the Empress of Ireland's starboard side. What happened to the RMS Empress of Ireland in those next few moments would seal her fate. The Storstad's reinforced bow, designed to cut through ice, slammed into the Empress's side, tearing a huge gash in her hull. 14 minutes of terror. The collision itself was not particularly violent. Many passengers, asleep in their cabins, barely felt the impact. But the damage was catastrophic. The Storstad had struck the Empress in the worst possible location, flooding her starboard side and causing her to list heavily. Why did the Empress of Ireland sink so quickly? Several factors contributed to her rapid demise. The point of impact, The collision breached several of the Empress's watertight compartments simultaneously. Many lower deck portholes had been left open due to the warm weather, allowing water to pour in. The list of the ship. As the Empress tilted to starboard, more portholes dipped below the waterline. Failure of watertight doors. Some watertight doors may not have been closed properly, allowing flooding to spread. Within minutes, the situation became dire. Water rushed into the ship at an alarming rate. Passengers, many still in their nightclothes, scrambled to reach the boat deck. But the severe list made movement difficult, and many found themselves trapped in flooding cabins. The crew worked desperately to launch lifeboats, but the rapidly tilting deck made this nearly impossible. Many boats couldn't be launched at all, while others capsized as they hit the water. In the darkness and chaos, acts of both heroism and desperation played out. Crew members risked their lives to save passengers. Parents frantically tried to find their children. Strangers helped one another don life jackets and climb to safety. But time was not on their side. Just 14 minutes after the collision, the Empress of Ireland rolled onto her starboard side and sank beneath the cold waters of the St. Lawrence. As dawn broke on May 29, 1914, the true scale of the disaster became apparent. The question on everyone's lips was, did anyone survive the Empress of Ireland? Miraculously, some did. Of the 1,477 people on board, 465 survived the sinking. But this meant that 1,012 lives were lost, making it the worst peacetime maritime disaster in Canadian history. How many survivors were there on the Empress of Ireland? The breakdown of survivors tells a stark tale. 172 crew members out of 420, 41 first-class passengers out of 87, 48 second-class passengers out of 253, 133 third-class passengers out of 717. The disparity in survival rates between classes was due in part to the location of the cabins. First-class cabins were higher up and on the port side, giving those passengers a better chance of escape as the ship listed to starboard. Did the captain of the Empress of Ireland survive? Yes, Captain Kendall was among the survivors. He was on the bridge when the collision occurred and stayed with his ship until the very end, being sucked under as she sank. He surfaced and was rescued by a lifeboat. In the days that followed, rescue efforts turned to recovery. How many bodies were recovered from the Empress of Ireland? In total, 337 bodies were recovered and brought to shore. Many were buried in a mass grave in nearby Rimouski, while others were claimed by relatives and buried elsewhere. The question of whether there are bones on the Empress of Ireland is a sensitive one. While many bodies were recovered, hundreds remain entombed within the wreck. Today, the site is considered a war grave and is protected by Canadian law. Investigations and lingering questions. In the wake of the disaster, two questions loomed large. How could this have happened? And who is at fault for the Empress of Ireland sinking? Two separate inquiries were launched, one Canadian and one Norwegian. Both reached different conclusions, each tending to favor their own country's ship. The Canadian inquiry placed the blame squarely on the Storstad, concluding that it had changed course in the fog and struck the stationary Empress. The Norwegian inquiry, on the other hand, claimed that the Empress was moving and had turned into the path of the Storstad. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Both ships made errors in judgment in the fog, and the lack of radio communication between them proved fatal. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Empress of Ireland disaster is its connection to another famous shipwreck, who survived both Titanic and Empress of Ireland. Remarkably, there was one man who cheated death twice. His name was Frank Tugwood. Tugwood had been a steward aboard the Titanic when it sank in 1912. He survived that disaster and, 2 years later, found himself working aboard the Empress of Ireland. Once again, fate smiled on Tugwood, and he survived the sinking of the Empress as well. The wreck and its legacy. Today, the Empress of Ireland lies at the bottom of the St. Lawrence River, a silent memorial to the lives lost that foggy night in 1914. But how deep is the Empress of Ireland wreck? The ship rests on her starboard side at a depth of about 130 feet, 40 meters. Can you dive the Empress of Ireland wreck? Yes, but it's not for the faint of heart. The wreck is considered one of the most dangerous dive sites in the world due to the cold water, strong currents, and poor visibility. Despite these challenges, it remains a popular site for experienced technical divers. Over the years, numerous artifacts have been recovered from the wreck, helping to tell the story of the ship and her passengers. However, like many shipwrecks, the Empress has also been subject to looting, leading to stricter protection measures. The legacy of the Empress of Ireland extends beyond the wreck itself. The disaster led to changes in maritime safety regulations, including improved protocols for fog navigation and the handling of watertight doors. Unsolved questions and enduring mystery. Despite the investigations and the passage of time, many questions about the Empress of Ireland disaster remain unanswered. 1. Why did both ships seem to lose track of each other so completely in the fog? 2. Could more lives have been saved if the crew had been better prepared for an emergency? 3. What if the collision had occurred just a few feet forward or aft? Would the outcome have been different? 4. How might history have remembered this tragedy if World War I hadn't broken out just 2 months later? These questions continue to intrigue historians and maritime enthusiasts, ensuring that the story of the Empress of Ireland lives on. Conclusion. As we surface from our deep dive into the tragedy of the RMS Empress of Ireland, we're left with a profound sense of loss and lingering mystery. In just 14 minutes, over 1,000 lives were cut short, dreams were shattered, and a magnificent ship was consigned to the depths. Yet, in many ways, the Empress of Ireland's story is one of resilience. It lives on through the descendants of survivors, through the divers who explore her wreck, and through memorials that stand as silent sentinels to her memory. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of the Empress of Ireland is not just the lives lost, but how quickly the world forgot. As we remember this disaster today, we honor those who perished and those who survived. We recognize that every shipwreck, every disaster, has stories to tell and lessons to teach. So the next time you hear of the great maritime disasters of the 20th century, remember the Empress of Ireland. Remember the fog-shrouded night on the St. Lawrence River, the 14 minutes of terror, and the questions that still echo across the waters of time. And as you ponder this forgotten tragedy, ask yourself, what other stories lie waiting to be uncovered? What other mysteries lurk beneath the waves of history? The tale of the Empress of Ireland reminds us that there are always more depths to plumb, more secrets to uncover, in the vast ocean of human experience.